I have a lot of friends who showed up today, and some of them are District 8 neighbors. Some of them are city staffers. In fact, we have some city staffers who are District 8 neighbors as well. And so what we've asked you all to do is to come here today to meet with me and to meet with our city manager so that we can discuss this city's proposed $3.4 billion budget. We are the 7th largest city in the United States. We are the poorest large city in the United States. We are also a city that hosts close to 40 plus million. How many people do we host a year in tourism around here? No, not 12 million tourists in San Antonio a year. Last I checked, I think we were north of 40 million people who visit us annually, right? We're a city that is growing at a pace that is very, very difficult to keep up. People are bringing their, people are coming for new jobs, making new investments here, but they're also bringing their cars, right? And they're bringing their problems. And so we have, and they're also requesting the same level of services that all of you are accustomed to. So we have a lot of ground to cover tonight. And so here's a few ground rules. One, or housekeeping matter. One, restrooms are outside the door to your left. Two, if you need any assistance whatsoever, you can ask any of my staff members who will now raise their hands. Raise your hands, guys. District 8 staff. Any of those folks that raise their hands, if you need anything, ask them and they'll get it for you. Three, most of you have families, so if you have mobile phones, keep them on in case you need to answer an emergency call, but please put it on silent and take your call outside. This is probably the safest room in all of San Antonio right now because we've got lots and lots of people here to protect you. But if we happen to have any kind of emergency, if somebody's not feeling well, raise your hand because we've got emergency response here as well. Let's talk about what a budget is. A budget is required of us every single year. A budget is the roadmap for how the city will invest and resources to do the things that the community has asked us to do. For example, keep our streets safe, right? So the community has asked us to make sure that we maintain a well-staffed police department. Number two, the community has said we want clean parks and clean spaces out there for us to enjoy. That's something that we have to pay for, right? The community has asked that we make sure that we fill potholes, that we move water from one place to another when there's big mega storms, right? The community has also said we need you to answer 911 calls as fast as possible. And so all of these things are the things that go into a budget. And what we do is we adopt this budget at the beginning, we adopt this budget, and then that allows us to tell the public how we're investing your dollars. After all, the city is an organization that is a steward of your dollars. Before I hand it off to Eric Walsh, I want to remind you of something. And actually, let's do it this way. For those of you that are City of San Antonio staff, please raise your hands if you live within the city limits. Good. Why do I do that? I do that to remind you that San Antonio is a city run by San Antonians for the benefit of San Antonians. These men and women are your neighbors. They drive on your streets. They use your parks. They rely on the 911 calls to be answered just as fast for their kids and their loved ones as you do. They want safe streets as well, right? And they want to make sure that they live in a city where people can live, work, play, and thrive. So they've got skin in the game. These are very smart engineers and people who could have gone to the private industry and gotten rich probably, but instead they chose to serve you. I get to work alongside these men and women who have sacrificed a lot and who sacrifice a lot for you, right? And today, many of them have taken time off from spending time with their families to be with us so that all of your questions can be answered, okay? And to that, I say thank you. Really, we could have done this probably with Eric Walsh only, but Eric, you brought the A-team with us, really to make sure that nobody's questions go unanswered, okay? So with that, there will be questions, okay? So please, when the time comes for questions, let's make sure that we use our hands and we'll call on you, right? Nobody's questions will go unanswered. And more importantly, please remember the people who have the microphone are your neighbors. And so let's treat them as if you would want your neighbor to treat you, okay? So with that, will you help me welcome my friend and a person I admire very much because the guy burns the candle at all, both ends every single night, Chief McManus. No. Eric Walsh, come on up here, Eric.
All right, thank you, Councilman. And in all seriousness, if you have questions for Chief McManus, start writing them down now because he likes to answer them at the end. This is our third town hall of the week, and we're doing 10 of these throughout the city. I'll walk through the proposed budget. A lot of what we did as I laid out the proposed budget to council last Thursday really kind of sets the framework for the council conversations for the next month. And the council will do 10 budget work sessions. We've done 2 already this week. They're long. They get into the details of the proposed budget and the different areas of the city. We're also doing 10 of these budget town halls throughout the city. And tonight is the 3rd one we've done this week. And so, and
I forgot to announce that there's Spanish interpretation services. I just heard that I was supposed to do
por supuesto, go ahead.
Por supuesto. So, anybody who needs Spanish interpretation services, we've got somebody on site. Si necesitan traducción en español, tenemos alguien aquí que les pueda ayudar y es un intérprete muy capaz con la que yo acabo de hablar. Muchas gracias por estar aquí.
Thanks, Councilman. So this is part of the outreach. The council is scheduled to adopt the budget on September 15th, and so we have a whole lot of work. There are also 2 public hearings the council will have. I'll walk through for you the framework of the proposed budget. We have a lot of department heads here, a lot of department representatives from solid waste, from the budget office, from the library department. Our library director is here, the chief is here, Metro Health Director, Animal Care Services Director, Neighborhood Housing Services, Parks and Rec. So a whole slew of departments are represented. So please don't hesitate to ask us any questions or stop me in the presentation because I'm going to try to cut this at a high level. So the general framework of the proposed budget is built on the council priorities and the community's priorities. And I'm going to show you here a survey that we conducted earlier this summer. And we'll show you what the citywide results are and what the District 8 results are. The council also had their budget work session in April where they, as a group, kind of decided early this year, usually we do this in June, decided as a group what the council priorities were for the entire group. These 2, the citizen survey and the council conversation and where they land, help set the framework for the work we do in developing the proposed budget. So on this slide, you see the top 5 community service priorities for the citywide results and the District 8 results. Can everybody see them here? And a lot of consistency. Affordable housing is on the District 8 result. Did not make the top 5 citywide, but a lot of consistency in terms of property tax relief, public safety, infrastructure on the citywide, parks and recreation a little bit higher in District 8. So this is the framework, and we've got this broken out. If you're interested, it's all online. You can look at every different council district as well as the citywide results. Next slide. So our total budget, proposed budget, is $3.4 billion, and it's broken up into, in this slide, 3 different areas. Our general fund at $1.5 billion. That's where we collect our general revenue, our property tax revenue, our sales tax revenue. It's where we also pay for all of our basic services like police and fire in this building, and is our largest account, if I can call it that. $1.25 billion in restricted funds. So our airport is operated based on the revenues we collect at the airport. Our solid waste operations, that's funded by not tax revenue, but funded by the solid waste fees that customers pay. Our hotel occupancy tax fund that pays for the convention center and the Alamo Dome and our arts programming is all funded by the hotel occupancy tax that people pay when they stay in hotels. It's also in that restricted fund category where we have all of our state and federal grants. So that's a total of $1.25 billion next year. And then our capital program for next year is $641 million. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, but we have our 2022 bond program, the first year of our 2022 bond program, about $160 million of that $641 million is the first year to begin that bond program. Next slide. So let's talk about the general fund in a little bit more detail. You can see here that we spend the majority of our money, which is sales tax, property tax, and our revenue from CPS. The majority of our money is spent on public safety at 60.7% next year. And then you see the variety of other services, basic services that we provide, public works and parks being significant ones, and then a multitude of smaller efforts over to the left of to the right of the chart. I want to point out a couple of things about our revenue. And the revenue is in the green on the outside. So about 28% of our revenue comes from property tax, almost 26% from sales tax, and about 26% from CPS. So we have three main revenue sources. A lot different than a lot of other local governments. I'll talk a little bit about CPS here in a second, but those are our three main revenue sources, and sales tax has been very strong this year. In spite of inflation and in spite of other economic issues, not just here in San Antonio, but in other parts of the state, sales tax collection has been very strong. Will there be a recession next year? Who knows? We are moderately conservative in terms of our growth. Going forward, we're projecting an additional 3% growth in sales tax next year. But that's key to making sure that we're balanced and providing the basic resources to be able to continue to provide these services to the community. Next slide. So one of the things the council did at their work session in April was that their number one priority was to provide property tax relief. And does anybody else know what else was happening in April when the council was having this discussion? Chief McManus? No, he left, didn't he? All right. So everybody was getting the appraisal, your appraised value of your homes. So it was a high priority for the council. The council asked the staff to develop a number of different options, and we came back to the council in May and then again in June, and the council took three actions that they needed to take before July 1st to be in this year's budget. And these are the three actions they took. They increased the homestead exemption for city taxes from 0.1% value of your homestead to 10%. They increased the disabled persons exemption from $12,500 to $85,000, and they increased the over 65 exemption from $65,000 to $85,000. Those exemptions that the council amended in June, plus our senior tax freeze, the city's going to forego about $95 million in property tax revenue next year because of these exemptions and because of the senior freeze element. That $95 million went up $22.5 million because of these three things that the council put in place. So $22.5 million additionally on top of what we were already doing in terms of property tax relief. Next slide. The other part that we talked about with the council back in June was with those exemptions in place and the state law, the current state law, we knew we were going to have to reduce our tax rate because of the increase in values. This issue, the council debated whether or not to add additional exemptions, but chose not to under the strategy that the reduction in the rate benefits everybody. You saw on the previous slide, there was a target to those that own homes, right? The disabled, the over 65, the elderly. A reduction in our property tax rate affects everybody. The disabled, over 65, own a home, multifamily, commercial, business. We were projecting at the time that reduction would be about 1.3 cents on the tax rate. And then given the certified appraised values we got in July, it was a little bit more. So in the proposed budget, the tax rate is going down 1.67 cents. The last time the city reduced the tax rate was in 2016. And so this is significant. We've all felt, as the councilman mentioned earlier, we all live here. We all opened the same envelope in April. And a reminder that the city represents 20% of your tax bill. School districts make up about 50%, and the city is about 20% of your total tax bill. Next slide. So the other way we, in the proposed budget, proposes to provide relief to residents is through our Cps revenue. And so I mentioned earlier that it's one of our three largest revenue sources. The city, 70 some odd years ago, purchased CPS, and if CPS was a private company, they would be paying us property taxes like you and me. But instead, when it was set up, we collect 14% of their revenue. And that's in lieu of property taxes. And you saw that this revenue is generally about 25% of our revenue, so it's a lot of money. And we always bet, given that this can be an erratic revenue source based on weather or fuel prices, that we're going to be 2, 3, 4% above revenue. And when that happens, we generally use that money for one type of expenses, because this revenue, unlike sales tax or property tax, does this. It goes up and down. This year, and earlier in the year, as geopolitical issues on the other side of the planet were causing natural gas prices to increase, we started to see increased bills and increased revenue. And we told the council in May, when we did our trial budget, that we were expecting to be $35 million over our revenue projection for this fiscal year. And that was in mid-May. And then summer hit, and it's been hot as heck all summer long. Natural gas prices have still been high, and many of you have probably paid very high CPS bills, higher than you've ever paid before. Increased demand because of the weather and the natural gas prices have driven that. So while you and every ratepayer has had extraordinarily high bills, we have experienced extraordinarily high revenue that is not normal. We're projecting that number is $75 million in this year's budget that we'll collect over our revenue projections. And so the proposal that I made to the council last week was that we take $50 million of that $75 million and do two things with it. One, contribute $5 million to a low-income assistance program that it's already established. It's called REAP. And it's where folks can go that qualify twice a year for up to $400 in credit towards bills. And then the balance of the money, the $45 million, would be a credit to all CPS Energy customers. Regardless of where you live, regardless if you're a business or a resident, under the thought that we can afford to do that this year, number one. Number two, that credit would be distributed based on how we receive the money. So it's based off of energy usage in the month of July. And that the average residential customer had an electrical bill of $230 in the month of July. And that average customer would get a $31 credit. Now, if you live in a one-bedroom apartment and you did not spend $230, you would not get you'd get less than $31. If you paid more than $230, then you'd get a higher credit. And we worked with CPS in order to determine that. This is, and the council had a work session on this on Tuesday, a lot of conversation. We're going to have another one probably here in about a week in order to decide what to do. The council will need to decide what to do with these funds. This is not going to wipe away anybody's outstanding bills that may owe CPS. This is not going to pay everybody's full utility bill. It is the city recognizing as the owner of CPS that everybody has experienced extraordinarily high bills, and like I said earlier, we have experienced extraordinarily unexpected revenue. So we're doing our part with the customers. And so A lot more conversation here. I'd be interested in hearing from the group here. I'm sure the councilman would like to hear what your thoughts are. I'll tell you right now, it's never enough, given what everybody's gone through. The alternative is that the city hold on to the $75 million or the $50 million and we do something with it. It's city revenue. That's not CPS revenue. That's city revenue. So a big item that is in our this year's fiscal year budget that the council will need to decide upon. Next slide. So what are we doing in terms of public safety? The proposed budget has 78 additional officers. So we'll have a total of, Maria had 25, how many total police officers? A little over 2,500 police officers. And we're really in two different areas. One is a federal grant that we've applied for 50 officers, and we had to set aside about $3.5 million for to match the federal dollars. We won't know if we get the federal grant until middle of September, but those officers would be dedicated to recommendations that we expect to get from UTSA and the Criminal Justice Department on a report that the chief commissioned on violent crime. These two professors at UTSA have done similar work with other major cities in the country, around the country, and the idea is that when we get those recommendations, we'll use these officers to be able to implement those recommendations. It's all on violent crime. It's not property crime. It's violent crime, and it's likely going to involve improving visibility in those areas where we're getting the 911 calls or where we have violent crime. The second area, we're adding 28 police supervisors to the new SAPD North St. Mary's police station that'll open up in early 2024. We'll need to hire those individuals by next summer so that we have them in place for when the building opens up early in 2024. We've got money set aside for the collective bargaining agreement for the officers in next year's budget, and we'll be replacing our in-car video system in the police vehicles. Every officer's got a body cam on their chest. We also have cameras inside the vehicles, and it's time to replace that system. In terms of fire, we're adding 2 primary units to the fire department to improve response times. One at Fire Station 24 off of Austin Highway, which is a new fire station that was constructed with the 2017 bond program, and it'll open up here in about 2 or 3 months. But it's an additional first responder unit to be able to respond to emergency medical calls. And then a new ladder company that'll be added to Fire Station 45 off of 151. We also have funds in next year's proposed budget for the fire collective bargaining agreement that'll go into effect. Their adjustment in pay will go into effect in January of 2023. Next slide. So what are we doing in terms of Parks and Rec, which was a high priority for District 8? And we talked about this is one of the work session items that the council heard about today. Overall, almost $19.5 million, a little over $19.5 million in additional dollars for Parks and Recreation. And these are the areas that we're spending, that we're proposing to spend. $7.7 million in renovating and improving 17 parks facilities. Most of those facilities are in older parts of the San Antonio that were not on the final bond list and need work on them. They're all heavily used facilities, and we need to make sure that we keep up with those facilities. They're in dire need of some love and attention from the city. Proposed budget also has $10 million to continue the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program. Now, that program was going to continue regardless, and we were intending on issuing debt next year to do that. But we've got additional one-time money, and remember earlier I talked about our projections for CPS are $75 million over budget, and the element we're talking about in terms of credit for CPS customers is $50 million. That $25 million that we're holding on to, $10 million of it is to direct towards the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program. We also have 2 new parks facilities coming on board next year that were 2017 bond programs. We have 2.5 miles of linear creekways that will open up next year. And I'm forgetting how many acres of parks. 200 acres of parks. So we got to take care of those. So we needed to include operating money into the budget to be able to do that. Next slide. So affordable housing, another priority for District 8. In next year's budget, we have a total of $136 million in affordable housing. $99 million of that is from the $150 million housing bond that the voters approved in May. And actually, this Friday, we'll be issuing solicitations to use those dollars and leverage additional investment from either the private sector or nonprofits on building or rehabbing existing housing units. All told, our goal for next year with this $136 million is to add 2,500 housing units into the system. And we all understand that the council for the last couple of years has made this a priority, especially as the city continues to grow and the local economy continues to change. This is becoming a more of an issue for us. That's one of the reasons why we're accelerating the $150 million that the voters just approved and trying to push this money out as soon as possible. Next slide. Infrastructure maintenance, a high priority citywide. In next year's budget, we have almost $154.5 million in infrastructure programs, maintenance programs. This is not bond program. This is street work, street maintenance, it's sidewalks, it's the neighborhood mobility program, it's new traffic signals. We're adding 6 new traffic signals and doing additional design work on other intersections that need traffic signals. This is a $13 million increase over this year's budget. So this was a top priority of the council. So we are proposing to invest more. As San Antonio continues to grow, this will always be an issue for us. And Public Works, with their maintenance plan and working with the council districts, is making sure that the 4,500 miles of streets we have to maintain, that we maintain them. If we don't maintain them, then they become bond programs, and we got to reconstruct them. And we don't have enough money to do every street every year, but we do have a 5-year street IMP infrastructure plan that's online. You can go online, you can look and see what streets are scheduled to be maintained going into the future 5 years. Next slide. Here are a couple of examples of street and sidewalk projects that are in District 8 next year. We do have representatives here from Public Works. If you've got questions about any additional projects, then Christy back here from Public Works can help you. Next slide. So Metro Health, our SA Ford plan, and the council approved this 5-year plan. This is not COVID related. This is all things other than COVID. But Metro Health is one of the departments that is a common thread through a lot of what we do. What the police department deals with from a violence prevention or mental health, what our EMS system deals with, what human services deals with when they're dealing with either social service activities or the homelessness, parks programming and healthy programming, how we build sidewalks and ensure that folks can safely move around the city. Part of that 5-year plan was to increase our local spending in the health department and beef up that local commitment. So next year, as federal grants start to wane in the proposed budget, we have $3.8 million that we'll be adding in our general fund to continue those programs. We also have a partnership that we're proposing with the new School of Public Health established at UT Health in the Medical Center. A 5-year commitment, $10 million total, $2 million a year. And that's really a partnership between Metro Health, the real world experience of what's happening out there in terms of violence prevention, domestic violence, mental health, access to care, and the academic institution. And partnering that up, there's a lot of benefit to us as an organization and to the community. There certainly is a lot of benefit to the school as they get off the ground in 2024. Next slide. The library director is back here in the back corner, and he's hosting us tonight. We'll be doing renovations at 8 different facilities that were not able to be added to the bond program, so to the tune of $3.2 million. And then adding $1.5 million to our library materials budget, which is kind of an important milestone for the library, making sure that we have a large enough library materials budget to ensure the material out there is fresh, is what the customer is asking for. And Ramiro and his team came up with a plan right before COVID that we had to put on hold. And next year's budget accelerates, and he'll get to his goal of making sure that we're matching up with the funding that you see in other large public library systems. Next slide. You know, in terms of human services, I think the highlight here is homelessness. And I'm certain that some of you may have questions about this. But the two top items up on that slide are bringing in homeless outreach workers that were funded by federal grants during COVID, because there's still a lot of work that needs to continue. We also established a homeless hotline that really wasn't just for homeless. It was those that were having housing issues and maybe, you know, a week away from becoming homeless, and getting them connected to our Neighborhood and Housing Services Department and programs that are funded. And I'm recommending in the proposed budget that we continue those programs that have been funded by the federal government for the last 2 years, because there still is a high degree of need. The second item on there was also funded by the federal government for the last year, over a year, and it is a small hotel on the northeast side of downtown. It's a low barrier shelter for the chronic homeless. Sam Ministries provides the wraparound services for us. It's hugely expensive, and that lease ends at the end of September. I'm recommending in the proposed budget that we extend that for another 6 months. We've got to figure out what to do with that long term, but to do that for a full year was almost $2.5 million. The hotel only has it was either 45 or 48 homes or rooms. It's not a large facility, so very, very expensive. There is a need, and we're going to need to work with our homeless partners over the next couple of months to figure out what is the next step for these individuals. But funding that completely forevermore within the general fund was not what I wanted to recommend to the council. So we're going to need to figure out how to attack that from a different angle. Next slide. So here's our capital budget. If you go around the ring there, those are the major areas where we spend our money. The library system, $10 million in our capital budget. Public safety projects, we've got drainage projects. The largest on here is streets, obviously, as we continue all of our street work. And the capital budget that we show council, you have $641 million on this slide, and that's just for FY23. But what we give the council, and what you can look at online or back here with the budget office, back there with the budget office, is we have a 5-year capital budget plan that does, go to the next slide, which takes the 2022 bond program that the voters approved in May and lays out over the next 5 years how we're going to spend the money. And those projects on that slide are all of the District 8 projects that were included in the bond program. Now you'll see that we spend most of our money generally in years 3, 4, and 5. Those are our construction years. Years 1 and 2 are primarily our design years. The council later on in October or November will mass select every engineer, architect, and landscape architect for all 183 bond programs, and then they will start the design on all the projects. And so as the projects move through the 5-year plan, we'll start construction for most of those projects beginning in 2025. Next slide. So these budget work sessions that the council's been having, and they have every Tuesday and Wednesday afternoon. That'll run through September 14th. You can watch it online. You can come downtown for free parking. You can watch it on TVSA. Those work sessions are broken out by departments. Next Tuesday, Chief McManus and Chief Hood and our municipal court system are going to present their proposed budgets. So every day is a specific category or department. These meetings that we're having tonight will run through early September. We've got 2 public hearings on the 31st and the 8th, and the council scheduled to adopt the budget on the 15th of September. So a little over a month from now, and a whole bunch of meetings and conversations that the council will have. If you want to provide comments to us, you can either scan back here one of the tables or scan that code. Leave us your comments. We're collecting that information, and we'll be providing a report to the council on what we're hearing or things you want to say or share once we collect all that information after the last one on September 1st. So That's it. We have a lot of folks here to answer questions, and let me turn it over to Laura. Now, Laura's got a microphone, so you're going to have to use the microphone because there are folks watching online, and we want them to hear the question.
A little bit intrigued with the excess in the CPS revenue. And although I know that politically speaking, giving back $31 per household is very attractive, in reality, perhaps, and this is my opinion, I'm not trying to preach anything, $31 in 1 month is not going to make that big of an effect in the budget of the family. But if we have learned something from the past years, is that uncertainty is here. So if we can have these funds in thinking in innovative ways to produce energy for the hundreds, probably are thousands, of new homes that are coming to San Antonio, we are investing in a future less complicated for the ones that are coming after us. So when you have a little bit of budget, it's easier to start a program that is a little bit more innovative. That when you have to collect the money and sell the idea. The beauty of COVID has been teaching us that we need to be prepared for the unseeable.
Right.
And this is going to happen again. Yeah. I don't want to be a doomsayer, but
Kind of feels that way.
it's
There's
not
a
the
lot of
feeling.
uncertainty, right? It's a lot of unknown.
It's not the feeling. It's just looking at science. With the way we are connected all over the world, it's bound to happen.
Yeah.
It's logical. It's the logical next step. So that would be my suggestion, to do something that is a little bit more meaningful. That $31 in my pocket now, then maybe I'm going to have dinner and I
Right.
end the debt.
Well, that's exactly, and I'll hand the microphone to the councilman, because that's exactly the conversation the council had yesterday for 3 hours, and so I'll let the councilman kind of weigh in on that. The only thing I'll add is that I'm not a climatologist, right? And our responsibility is to lay out the financial plan for the next 24 months, and whether this continues to happen every year or every other year, or won't happen again for another 20 years, it's hard for me as we develop what the financial spending plan is. Because when we look at it from a financial standpoint at the cities, we were 21% over our revenue, and that number every week in May, at the end of May, June, and July, that number kept going up. And so for the staff, my responsibility is to lay out the financial plan. But the issue that you're talking about is the exact conversation that the council is trying to weigh in on. What do they do? Is it an opportunity, or is it an obligation to do something in terms of the ratepayers?
It's a debate that's happening right now. A lot of the debate is happening at these budget goal setting meetings. So council has been getting together every few days, right, where we get different presentations from different departments, and we talk about, this is what we did in 2022. This is how San Antonio is different. This is how we respond to growth or different needs or different priorities or different challenges, right? But I'll tell you, for those of you that are wondering how budget season starts, it starts by Eric coming to us, sitting down in my office with Maria Villagomez and saying, all right, here's what we heard from the public all year long, right? Here's what we heard recently from the public in the form of some very targeted surveys that we send out to all of you, right? And this is what we've been hearing from City Council for the past year as priorities. Now, Eric, have to deliver basic services to the city, right, to make sure that the city doesn't crumble and fall into the sea, right? But we understand that there's lots of different priorities out there, and basically hearing from all of these different groups over the year, we think that this is the budget that my staff and I feel will maintain services and address the many issues that you guys want to address while being a balanced budget, right? And while using the money as efficiently as possible, right? And we have this conversation every year. I've had this conversation now for 5 years in a row with Eric and your predecessor. And every year they've delivered a balanced budget. So, I mean, one thing is to balance your checkbook, right? Another thing is to balance a $3.4 billion budget. And it takes an army of people to do that, right? How many employees answer up to you? Over 13,000 San Antonians are serving you, right? And think about that, the sheer amount of money that requires. But something happened that we've never had happen before, right? We had these horrible pandemic and the economic crisis, right? This very strange phenomenon of having better tax returns than any of us thought we'd get. And then, on top of that, inflation, right? And housing crisis, and heat waves, and a freeze in February. It's been a weird year. And to make things even weirder, Eric says, and I've got an extra $75 million coming in from CPS Energy that we didn't even think was going to come in. So if somebody were to come to you and say, hey, we just made an extra $75 million at our company, we didn't think that was going to happen, what would happen at that company? Most people would do what? They'd high-five each other and say, yes, right? That's a great year. That doesn't happen at the city. Instead, Eric followed that news with, and my recommendation is we give it back to the people of San Antonio because that's their money. It's not ours, right? So remember, we're not a for-profit business here, right? We work for you, and you are, in essence, the shareholders, right? And so I said, well, Eric, you know, what are some of my other council colleagues asking when you tell them this? And he says, well, look, there's another group of council colleagues who've got an idea, right? And their idea is to take that money and to spend it on addressing climate change and to address the reason that we got this surplus from CPS. I was like, okay, that's an interesting argument, right? Talked to the mayor, and the mayor's like, look, I think we need to have a debate on this. And we've been debating now for, 3 days in a row, I think, on this very issue, right? I can't tell you how this vote is gonna turn out and what the results of it are. But that's why these meetings are so useful to Eric and to me, because this is where we get to ask you, either now if you want, or later, just come up and tell me, or email me, right? I'd like to know from my constituents, what would you like? Would you like your money returned to you? And I know it's not a lot of money, right? But it's money, right? And I'll tell you that we had this conversation yesterday. It may not be a lot of money to you, right? It may not be a lot of money to me, but $31 could be the difference between filling an insulin prescription, right, or not, for a person who's just drawing down on Social Security and has a very limited budget. Or it could mean a copay for your doctor. And so I don't treat the number $31 very casually, right, because it could be very important.
I'm not doing that at all.
Yeah, yeah.
I overheard that one person that is in charge of one of the less affluent district is saying $31 is not much money for me, my constituency.
Yeah.
So I'm basing that. I believe me, I don't want to treat that as very casual. I think it's very important. But I think what is even more important is that we are prepared to face what all those houses are going to be demanding from you. And it's obvious that we are not generating the energy that we need. We saw that in the big freeze, that I freeze all my brain cells. And by the way, and so we have to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
If we can find programs buying domestic refrigerators and whatever that consume less energy, or if we can do rebates for solar energy, or something a little bit more creative, not run-of-the-mill, that is going to help us build that different future that we are going to need. That's obvious. The freeze and lower your temperature and go hot is showing us that we are going to need that in the future. Why don't we start now investing in that future?
I'm going to invite you to the next debate, I'm just going to say what she says. Yeah, I mean, like, listen to this nice lady. She's got some good ideas. And so that is, I think you've captured exactly what's being debated, right? Do we make an initial investment on some fundamental changes that need to happen in order to respond to a San Antonio that's getting hotter and getting colder, right? Or to respond to what could be the next hurricane, right? You don't know, right? Hurricane Harvey only missed us by 50 miles, right? So that's the choice we're having to make. It's a choice I'm not taking very lightly. And you use the word political. You're right. I mean, politics is something that I think about. But when it comes to this, I'll tell you, this is a lose-lose for me, right? Because no matter how I vote, half of San Antonio is going to say, $31? What's wrong with you? Why would, like that's politically unpopular, right? Or how dare you not give us back our $50 million? No matter what, I lose. And right now, I'm not thinking politics. I'm thinking about what's the right thing to do, right? And we're presented with two very interesting options. Did I address that? Did I answer your question? Because all right, good. I'm going to give the mic back to the boss.
I just wanted to put a little bug in your ear.
Yes, ma'am.
That we need to be looking to the future. It's not that I'm going to be there. I'm in the out. But just for the future, we need to be looking to that.
Yeah.
Sorry to be very naggy
No.
is the word, but it's something that is very dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I have always thought about innovation. It was part of my dissertation, and I continue to feel that we, in order to get to that future, we need to be creative. And I think that particularly you, that I've been knowing you for a couple of months, are people that are intelligent and looking to the future.
Thank you so much.
Not quick fixes with a Band-Aid.
Well, the nice thing about tonight's meeting is that it's on Facebook. We're airing it, and it's going to be stored for everybody to see forever and ever. And so tonight I'm going to go home and tell my wife that somebody said I'm a smart guy who does nice. Okay, good. There's finally proof. There's evidence. All right, next questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Regardless of how it goes down, how we figure out how to spend this money, anyways, I think it's important to point out that nobody's going to receive a check. It'll just be a reduction of the bill you already have. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm
You're
wrong.
right. It would be,
but
as proposed, a credit on the October bill.
Right. So I think that's important for people to know that. It's not, we're not going to send, they're not just going to send out money to folks and they're going to, blow it on something silly or something like that. So I think that's important to point that out. And I would like to see us, I don't know. I don't need the money myself. I'm not bragging. I'm just in a position that I don't need it. So I would like to see it, go for another purpose. I don't know what that is.
That's an interesting topic. One of the things the mayor asked yesterday that we're looking into for the next council debate on it is can CPS put in the bill an opt-out? So you get your bill, and if you don't want to opt out of the credit, then your credit would go to that low-income assistance program. And so that was an idea that the council talked about yesterday that we're looking into, and we're gonna see if we can ferret that out for next week.
If I could, I'm sorry, if I could do a follow-up too. What about this is going to be kind of a negative thing here, and I apologize ahead of time for that. But there's a lot of people that never paid their bills.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to get credited? I mean, I wouldn't think that you
Yes.
would want to do that.
Yeah, the proposal is yes, they would get credited, and it's because it's under the reality that the credit is going back to how we collected it. It's based on energy usage, and so part of what, and this is not a world that the council always lives in, but CPS is governed by a rate utility structure and state law. And state law says that utilities, particularly electric utilities, have to treat ratepayers uniform and equally. And we're in a unique situation here, and this is a part of the conversation the council had yesterday. if one council person's talking about potentially just giving a credit to City of San Antonio residents, and that's an idea the council talked about yesterday. But CPS and the council's rate-making authority, which is granted through state law, says that they have to treat ratepayers uniform and equally. If we made $50 million in barge revenue on the Riverwalk, and the council was debating what to do with it, they could do whatever they want, right? They could say it could all go to D8 residents if they wanted to do that. But so the council's got to look at it a little bit differently in this case because of that state law requirement.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cesario Garcia. I live here in District 8. And one of the things I was looking at is you said there's only $2.8 million for historical preservation. What about all the statues that were taken away out of the different parks that were, are they going to be put back? Since there's, but that's a low number also, I'd say, for 2.8 is historical preservation. Are we going to actually at some point, someday, maybe put those statues back where they belong, where they were to begin with? Or are they just going to be, does that preservation not apply to those that were removed?
So the $2.8 million you're talking about, that funds our Office of Historic Preservation. I'm only familiar with two statues that were taken down, right? And one of them happened about 5 years ago, the Confederate statue at Travis Park. No, that one's not going back. The second one that I'm familiar with is Christopher Columbus at Columbus Park, right outside the, outside that Catholic church there off of Santa Rosa. That one is not going back either because the council at the time, it was a previous council, talked about reframing that and redoing that square. So neither one of those are the only two statues I'm aware of that the city's taken down over the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay. My name is Adrian Balderrama. I am here as an advocate, I guess, for a portion of the police officers' fund there. What I'm trying to advocate for is a portion of funds going to help the San Antonio Police Safety Corps. I'm a product of that program. I literally started back in June of 1989 when I was 13 years old.
The Explorer program?
The Explorer program, exactly. I've been there long enough to go through 3 different chiefs for the city. I've been there long enough to outlast most of my advisors throughout that entire time there. Like I said, that program has built my confidence enough to get through college, to be a parole officer in the sex offender unit, to work as a trainer for the parole division for the state of Texas, and now with the Department of Justice with the FBI. I'm one of the only people that has gone on to work for the FBI and still be with the program. Many years ago when I was in college and with my first job when I got out of college, they asked me to come back to be a civilian advisor, and I've been there ever since. I'm primarily the one that hangs on to the money because, again, our officers can't hold on to that, and so I'm the one that watches over and manages the account for them.
And the account is made up of money with private donations?
Literally donations.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because when I first started, all we had was a parent association. Yeah. And the parents were the ones that went out and asked friends, asked companies, did barbecue fundraisers, and provided us the funds to help us with going to competitions.
Uniforms and stuff like that.
And everything like that. Yeah. And it was only parents. For years, there have been literally no parent involvement. We rarely see the parents anymore. They drop the kids off. If they come at all, the kids drive themselves. They meet the officers maybe when they go out to competitions, and the parents want to see the award ceremony, so they'll come and show up. And the way that stipend or way that portion of the budget would help our kids immensely would be to help the ones that are, I've been at the West Substation that entire time, and to help them with their uniforms, to buy a flashlight, to, the basic uniform, your shirt, your belt, your pants. Boots, optional. If they have to wear tennis shoes, we're good with that. But to get them a Sam Brown, to help them with handcuffs and things like that make that belt look complete, all that stuff is immensely, inspirational for them, that they get to look up to their police officers and see that, hey, I can sit in the car. I can do what they do. and I can be there like they are. To then be able to go off to a competition, state, local, and I think the last national competition that I went to was in South Carolina, and we stayed there. And you're talking about thousands of dollars that cost that the parents had to raise for us.
Yeah.
So any little bit that the city can do to help us out and help those kids, when we took a break during COVID and all those national attention things happened where police were denigrated and everything like that, I literally asked the kids when they finally came back, because I didn't understand, why are you here? I mean, you're a kid that saw all this stuff on national TV.
Yeah.
Why are you here? That's my interview question for them. And some of them, to a T, all of them said, it's because I want to make a difference.
Right.
I think I can help. And if then we can help them with basic uniforms or basic travel assistance to go to competitions and just to compete, the amount of confidence that builds for them is enormous.
Yeah. No.
So again, I just want to try to advocate for that.
No, point well taken, and one councilperson brought that issue up last week at the proposed budget, and the Police Explorer program is, important for a lot of reasons, to provide that opportunity and structure and mentorship, but also to get those folks someday to become San Antonio police officers. So, Chief, do you want to talk a little bit about that program? I mean, the funding for it is, what you're talking about is really, in the grand scheme of things, that should be really simple to be taken care of. And
Sure. Thanks for advocating for that program. It is truly good for those young kids in the city. Maria Villagomez just reminded me that we are budgeting $60,000 in the 2023 budget. So, I mean, everything you said, you're right on the money. It used to be the Explorers, and we dropped that. Yeah, we dropped that and went to the Public Safety Corps. But you see them at all the promotions and all the graduations and other events that the police department puts on. They've got the public safety cadets uniforms on, and they're very they stand
they work at
out.
the parades, Fiesta parades. They work. They help. The
What's
Fiesta
that?
parades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Eric brought up something really important, and just to put this in a bigger context for you, recruiting police officers is also one of Eric's big jobs, right? And from talking to Eric and from talking to Maria and talking to the chief, it's getting harder and harder and harder to do that, right? And we really are in a bloody knuckle competition with a lot of other cities and even private employers, right, who are looking for that excellent candidate who would be the right fit for our SAPD, right? And so we compete not just with salaries and benefits, but we compete, with a whole bunch of other, cities, and we try to pull from every lever. And one of our most effective levers is recruiting locally by reminding young people, right, that there is a very, very good career in SAPD. I know, having talked to our friends in the county and the sheriff, that it's not much easier for them over there, right? And you are walking, talking proof, right, that this Explorers Public Safety Corps works, right? That at the very end of the day, you developed into a career because you were exposed to some of these options. And so parole officers, bailiffs in court, right? I mean, like, those are fantastic careers, but it's getting harder for everybody in law enforcement who needs law enforcement to hire. That make sense? Yeah, all right. So by the way, I'm talking about the county, and then one of my mentors is in the back room. Judge Peter Sakai is, I was a baby lawyer when I used to practice in front of you, and I know that, a program like this is also a program for you, kids who may be in trouble, right, and they find an alternative way of getting some leadership development. It's not just about getting them to be cops, right? Programs like this help develop confidence, but also problem solving and talking, having difficult conversations and thinking about the world in a different way. The reason I mentioned Judge Sakai is because when these kids get in trouble and they don't have those opportunities, right, they end up in front of judges, and then judges have to make some pretty hard and horrible decisions about what to do with those kids. And so thanks for your service, Judge Sakai. Yeah.
And Eric, we have time for just one more question. I know there was a lot of good conversation.
Thank you. I think I'm right about this, maybe not. CPS and SAW, I believe, do not have a tiered payment system. Has that ever been considered? In other words, the more power you use, the more you pay. The more water you use, the more you pay. And I'm sure you remember some Express News stories in which there are people who use 1 million gallons of water, but I don't believe they're paying any kind of overage or paying more under that kind of system.
So I'm going to apologize. I mean, other than a ratepayer like you, I can't really go into any detail about what that rate structure looks like. Generally speaking, I know the rates that the council's approved in both utilities is based on usage, whether it's kilowattage or gallons used, and they do have tiered structures, but beyond that, I can't really talk too much about it because I'm just not in that world right now, or ever probably. Okay, well, thank you for everybody that came out tonight. If you didn't ask a question, you want to leave a comment, scan your, where's the scan at? Scan and provide us some comments. We're going to be providing that report. Even if you spoke, I mean, we're taking notes in here, but feel free to leave a comment and we'll collect that and provide that report to the council. And Ramiro, thanks for hosting us and thanks for coming out tonight.